Los Angeles, 1977. The city was alive, palm trees swaying under the golden California sun, freeways packed with cars, music floating through open windows. But beneath the glitter of Hollywood, something dark was growing, a presence that would soon turn the city of angels into a city of fear. Kenneth Bianchi was charming on the surface, the kind of man who could talk his way into anything. Clean-cut, confident, and always smiling, he looked more like a salesman than a killer. But behind those eyes was something broken, a man obsessed with control, manipulation, and the fantasy of power. Across town, his older cousin Angelo Buono Jr. lived in Glendale, a rougher part of Los Angeles. Angelo wasn't charming. He was loud, cruel, and dangerous, the kind of man who demanded respect through fear. He owned a small upholstery shop, but his real hobbies were women, money, and intimidation. When Kenneth moved to Los Angeles to start fresh, he went to live with Angelo. At first, it was supposed to be temporary, just until he found a job. But soon their bond turned into something much darker. They drank together, talked about women, and bragged about their toughness. Then those conversations began to twist. Talk about how women deserved to be taught lessons, how they could do anything they wanted if they were smart enough. Started as talk, but talk turned into action. Angelo liked to play the boss and Kenneth wanted to impress him. Together they became a perfect storm, one with experience and cruelty, the other with charm and deceit. They started small, picking up women on the streets, pretending to be police officers, flashing fake badges and telling the girls they were under arrest for prostitution. Most women didn't fight back, the men seemed official enough. Once inside Angelo's house, the nightmare began. At first, it was about control, about seeing how much they could get away with. But soon, control wasn't enough. The fear, the begging, the helplessness, it fed something dark inside both of them. The first victim that turned their game into murder was Yolanda Washington. She was young, beautiful, and trying to survive. Kenneth knew her from the streets, she had mentioned where she usually worked. That information sealed her fate. One night in October 1977, the cousins cruised the streets in Angelo's car. They spotted Yolanda, lured her with the fake cop story and took her to the car. She never made it home. The next morning, her body was found on a hillside near Los Angeles. She was naked, strangled, and left like a piece of garbage. Police at first thought it was an isolated attack, a single predator. But weeks later, another body appeared. Then another. And another. The hillsides of Los Angeles were becoming dumping grounds for women, young, pretty, often sex workers or students. The press began to call the unknown killer the Hillside Strangler. What no one knew was that it wasn't one man, it was two. And they hunted together like wolves. Kenneth and Angelo perfected their method. They used fake police badges to stop women late at night. Once the victim was in their control, they drove to Angelo's house, the place that would become a tomb for many. Inside they acted like it was routine police work. They made the victims stand against walls, handcuffed them and questioned them. Then when fear set in, they revealed their true faces. The terror was methodical, cold, almost ritualistic. They strangled their victims with cords, belts, even bare hands. Sometimes they posed the bodies, as if sending a message to the city. Kenneth kept mementos, tiny trophies, jewelry, photos, sometimes personal items. It was his way of reliving the power. But their killings weren't random. There was a pattern, each victim young, attractive, and alone. They were picked for opportunity, not rage. It was planned, controlled, and terrifyingly efficient. Soon, the newspapers splashed headlines about the Hillside Strangler. The city was gripped with panic. Women stopped walking alone. The police department launched one of the biggest manhunts in LA history. Still, Kenneth and Angelo laughed at the news. They watched television reports together, bragging about how smart they were, how the police had no idea there were two of them. They felt untouchable. But every killer makes mistakes. Kenneth began to crave independence. He wanted recognition. He wanted control over his cousin, and the partnership began to crack. Angelo was getting tired of Kenneth's arrogance. He called him weak, stupid, careless. Kenneth started killing on his own, behind Angelo's back. He left Los Angeles for Washington State, claiming he wanted to start a new life. But the darkness followed him there. Within months, another woman turned up dead, killed with the same precision as the Hillside murders. When police questioned Kenneth, he panicked. He wasn't the clever predator anymore, he was sloppy, nervous, desperate. He tried to talk his way out of everything, even pretending to have multiple personalities. But it was too late. Evidence linked him directly to the murder, and soon detectives connected him to the unsolved killings back in Los Angeles. When they searched his background, they found Angelo. The puzzle began to come together. Kenneth finally broke under pressure. To save himself from the death penalty, he confessed everything, every victim, every detail, every horrifying night in Angelo's house. He told investigators how they worked together, how Angelo would play the tough cop, barking orders, while Kenneth played the good one to gain trust. Then once the victim was under control, they both turned cruel. He described their killings one by one, the screams, the fear, the silence that followed. It was pure evil wrapped in calm words. When police finally arrested Angelo Buono Jr. in his home, the neighbors were shocked. They thought he was just a rough local businessman, not one of the most sadistic killers in California's history. But the truth was out. The Hillside Stranglers were no longer ghosts haunting the city, they were flesh and blood, exposed for what they really were, two men who turned their lust for control into murder. Los Angeles could finally breathe again, but the scars would last forever. Because monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they look just like us. The city had been living in fear for months. By early 1978, Los Angeles had changed. The nightlife wasn't the same. Women traveled in groups, men looked over their shoulders, and every new body found in the hills sent shockwaves through the streets. The name Hillside Strangler became a whisper that froze people in their tracks. But behind that terrifying name were two men, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono Jr., cousins who turned killing into their idea of fun. They didn't just murder, they planned. Every move was calculated. Every victim was chosen with care. Their partnership was built on control, dominance, and a twisted bond that grew stronger with every death. Kenneth admired Angelo, he looked up to him as the ultimate alpha. But deep down he also hated him. Angelo was the leader, the brain, the cruel teacher. Kenneth wanted to be the same, but he lacked the coldness. He wanted attention. He wanted people to fear him too. That jealousy, that need to prove himself, would soon tear them apart. The pattern of death. Between October 1977 and February 1978, 10 young women were murdered. Their names: Yolanda Washington, Judith Miller, Lissa Caston, Jane King, Dolores Cepeda, Sonia Johnson, Christina Weckler, Lauren Wagner, Kimberly Martin, and Cindy Hudspeth. Each was found on the hillsides around Los Angeles, dumped, naked, strangled, and posed like trophies. Most were young and struggling. Some were students. Some worked on the streets. Others were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The killers didn't discriminate, they hunted anyone they thought they could control. What made the murders even more horrifying was the ritual. The bodies were positioned deliberately. Some had rope marks around their necks and wrists, others had been strangled with cords. There were signs of sadistic torture, but no clues left behind. The killers were ghosts, moving at night, blending in, using police tactics to lure victims into traps. The LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, and even the FBI joined forces, trying to find a pattern. But there was none that made sense. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no motive that fit. The killers seemed to vanish into thin air. Until one mistake changed everything. The first crack. Kenneth couldn't stop. Even after the Los Angeles killings slowed down, he wanted more. He had tasted control, and he was addicted. In 1978, he moved to Bellingham, Washington, and got a job as a security guard. It seemed like a clean break, a new start. But Kenneth wasn't built for normal life. The fantasies followed him. One night, he lured two female students from a nearby college with a story about a job interview. They trusted him. He wore a uniform, had an official car, and spoke confidently. They never made it home. Police found their bodies in an empty house, strangled and dumped, just like the hillside victims. This time, though, Kenneth left behind evidence. Tire tracks, fingerprints, and inconsistencies in his story. He tried to talk his way out, claiming he was framed, but investigators had him cornered. Then came the moment that exposed the truth. Kenneth's fingerprint matched one found on one of the victims. He was arrested, and within days the calm, confident man turned into a desperate liar. The confession. Detectives in Washington soon realized Kenneth wasn't just a local killer. His methods matched the infamous Hillside Strangler. They contacted Los Angeles investigators, and when the LA team reviewed Kenneth's background, they saw the missing link: his cousin Angelo Buono Jr. The two men had lived together during the exact time the murders occurred. Suddenly the pattern made sense. When Kenneth realized he was trapped, he tried something insane. He claimed he had multiple personalities. He said another side of him, Steve Walker, was the real killer. Psychiatrists saw through it. It was all an act, an attempt to escape responsibility. Facing a possible death sentence, Kenneth finally broke. To save himself, he agreed to talk. What came out during his confession shocked even veteran detectives. He described the crimes in vivid, chilling detail, how they cruised the streets looking for women, flashing fake police badges. How they took the victims to Angelo's house in Glendale. How Angelo would bark orders, slap the victims and demand obedience. How they'd strangle the women slowly, to watch the life drain from their eyes. He admitted everything. When asked why they did it, Kenneth said something that made every investigator shudder. "We just wanted to see what it felt like to kill." That was their motive, pure, cold curiosity and lust for control. The trial of the Hillside Stranglers. In 1979, both men were charged with multiple counts of murder. But justice came slowly. The case was huge, 10 victims, endless evidence, and a defendant who kept changing his story. Kenneth Bianchi became the prosecution's key witness. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he testified against his cousin. During court, Angelo sat calmly, smirking as Kenneth described everything. He didn't flinch. He didn't show guilt. He looked at Kenneth like a traitor, not a partner. The court heard every horrifying detail, how they bound the victims, the way they mocked them, the methodical way they cleaned up afterward. For Los Angeles, it was a nightmare retold. Families of victims sat in the courtroom, weeping as the truth was laid bare. The jury listened to months of testimony about brutality so inhuman it seemed impossible two ordinary men could commit it. Finally, in 1983, after one of the longest and most expensive trials in California history, Angelo Buono Jr. was found guilty of 9 counts of murder. The judge called him evil personified. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kenneth Bianchi, serving a life sentence in Washington, later tried to get parole, but every request was denied. He remains behind bars to this day. Aftermath and legacy. The Hillside Strangler case left a scar on Los Angeles. It changed how people thought about safety, how police handled serial cases, and how media covered violence. Before this, serial killers were often seen as lone predators, men working in isolation. But this case proved something terrifying: evil can exist in pairs. 2 ordinary men, not geniuses, not monsters in appearance, managed to terrorize an entire city for months simply because they knew how to blend in. Detectives who worked the case later said what haunted them most wasn't the crime scenes. It was the fact that Kenneth and Angelo could sit at a bar, smile, joke, and talk about killing as if it were a casual hobby. Their victims were real people, daughters, friends, students, but to the killers they were just prey. Even decades later, the story of the Hillside Stranglers remains one of the darkest chapters in California's criminal history. Hollywood Hills that once symbolized dreams became symbols of fear. And every time the city hears of another unsolved case, whispers of the Stranglers return, reminders that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it drives beside you, smiles politely, and offers a helping hand. The couple who hunted together. In the end, the story of Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono Jr. is not just about murder, it's about the corruption of the human soul.